Let's make a start and look at allergen-related notifications. Here you see the last 10 years of notifications that were made globally around the world, which were taken from VIRA Horizon Scan. And you can see clearly in the blue and the yellow that the processed foods and cereals, which are processed, are the largest groups of having issues with allergens. Very often it means that the allergen is not declared on the packaging. And of course, this happens more easier with processed foods, which contain many ingredients. And the same thing is to an extent also true for cereals, because yes, cereals are still the main part, but very often there's other smaller ingredients part of those cereals as well. Another thing we can clearly see from this graph is that the trend is really up. Only the last 2 years, you might say, there are less notifications, but that is to some extent caused by the pandemic. Because there was less innovation, there were less changes to packaging materials and also less mistakes in that sense. If we look at the same picture, but now take another dimension, the countries which are involved, then we see at the top that it is in yellow the United States and in gray Canada, and below there's a lot of other colors, but actually these really are made up by the countries of the European Union. So yes, allergen-related notifications, allergen-related recalls happen throughout the globe. And I already mentioned this, allergen-related recalls. Let's have a look at the impact what a recall can have on a company. First of all, there are financial implications. A recall will cost the company on average between 0.1% and 10% of the total revenue of the company. Luckily, most recalls involving allergens are on the lower end of the scale. But if you translate 0.1% and 10% of the company revenue, that kind of boils down to 1 to 100% of the net profit of a company. And let me give you an example that comes closer to this 10% of the total revenue or 100% of the net profit. Imagine that you are a company which produces enzymes which are used to make cheese. But through some labeling mistakes, you actually found out that your enzyme does contain an allergen which was not declared. And you actually sold this product to the cheese manufacturer who literally made thousands of cheeses with your product because you only need a minute piece of enzyme in milk to create cheese. So you might think, okay, we have to pay for those thousands and thousands of cheeses. Well, actually, the problem is much bigger because one of the side products, which is derived after making cheese, is whey protein. And actually, this manufacturer has turned that whey protein into whey powder and sold that whey powder to some customers who are actually making infant formula. So now the recall is actually becoming much bigger. It is not just the cheeses that were manufactured with your enzyme, but also the whey powder and even the infant formula which was produced. So you have claim upon claim upon claim coming to you from the cheese manufacturer who also make the whey protein and the people who in the end made the infant formula. So you can see that a small mistake in terms of allergen cross-contamination, for example, can really result in a very big recall with large financial implications. Another impact of recalls is brand damage, especially if you are selling directly into retail or are producing for a retail brand. The brand damage can be enormous. Some realistic things that can happen after a recall is that you have a drop in sales volume, and that might even take you 10 years to recover from. The example I want to give here is a Chinese manufacturer of infant formula who added melamine to the formulation. And this had a huge impact. And still, we see this years and years later, that Chinese people still are inclined to purchase European infant formula and not Chinese, because they simply don't trust that brand anymore. And imagine what could happen if you sell your product and you really kill somebody because allergens were present. Nowadays, we have social media and the news will go really quickly, and the damage to your brand can be enormous. A third impact of recalls pertains to resources. If you have a recall, that takes an enormous amount of time of your staff. You might also need to reschedule production because you need to manufacture new product that you're going to send to the customers involved in the recall. So that might give you a severe drop in efficiency. You will also have additional handling and transport. Another thing you might face because of a recall are additional audits. You might get additional visits and audits from the authorities, certainly from your customers, because for example, the Food Safety Modernization Act dictates that if you cause a recall, that all your customers, if they're based in the US, should actually perform an on-site audit with you. So really, you're wasting a lot of time in case of a recall. And another thing that is often overlooked is that if you are a co-packing operation, this could even hurt you even more. You might lose some volume of the involved customer, but you might also lose volume of other customers if they learn that you made a mistake around your allergen management approach. And of course, recalls can have a personal impact. We literally see quality managers run into depression and burnout as results of a recall. So what should we do to prevent situations like these, to have issues with allergens? Well, you might say, we're GFSI certified, so we should be fine.